Okay, so let's just review what we did because we were a little late putting this recording on. So what we did here was we created an enumeration. We typed in public enum and we called it gender type. And in between these curly brackets, notice I put it in the namespace but not inside the class. This should make it available to any class actually. As long as I have it in one, I'm pretty sure. If we put another class in here, we'll actually have access to this gender type. And then we put all the items that are part of this type. You just list the item, put a comma in between all of them. We only have two, male and female. Okay? And then what we did was we went into the class diagram and then we added a property in the class diagram by going here where it says add new property, and we typed in gender. And then that's the name of the property. And then when we went to the type, we picked the gender type, which is the enumeration. And we made sure it's public so that you can access it from another class. Okay? So now we were going to go look at, see the code that it was generated for us. And if we go over here, so what I'm going to do is put it at the bottom here. So if we go over here, hopefully if we create others with this tool, it'll put it in the same location. It may or may not. You might have to just cut and paste and then organize it yourself. And then this will kind of be our properties section. And there's our methods down there. Notice that to create a method, to create a property, you type in whether it's public or private. You put the data type of the actual property, and then you put the property name, and then you put curly brackets. Okay? Inside these, so this is the beginning of the property right here, and then this is the end of the property right here. Inside the property, you put you use a special keyword called get, and it'll have a open and closing bracket. This is used to get the actual, this will be used to actually get the actual value. So if somebody wants to get what the value is of that actual property, they'll use it'll run the code in between here, and if somebody wants to set the value of this particular property or set what the gender is, they would you would put your code inside here. Okay? So this is another form of encapsulation because this is encapsulating the variable that's going to be used to store the value, which we have not created yet. Now, if we go to our notes, there's a couple of different ways we can do this. So I want to open up the notes. Okay, so what we need to do is we need a variable that is going to be used for this method, for this property that keeps track of the actual value. So we're going to go all the way up to where our fields are, or our data members, and we're going to create one called private, double, and I'm going to put a little M in front. I'm going to call it gender type, or gender. Okay, so there's my gender. And then over here, I'm going to get rid of this. We're going to go back into our property. And then to get it, all we have to do is return the value. So we just use the keyword return, and then we use mGender, like that. Oh no, it doesn't like that. Oh, what did I do? Oh, I created it as a double. What am I doing? Duh. It should be gender type. Sorry. Because M gender is going to store the value. That's an enum, right? Only male or female. I don't know why I put double in. Wasn't thinking. Okay? So it has to be that enum type. So when I scroll down here, so return M gender is good now. And to set it, well, if we look at the notes, you use the word value. It's a special keyword. So when the person uses a property and they set it equal to something, it gets passed into this in our code as this term called value. So what I would do is I would just say M gender is going to equal value. It's a special keyword, and so when somebody uses this property and they set it equal to something, that's what gets passed in here. Whatever they set it equal to, which would be either the male or the female of that gender type. Okay, so it's kind of like they had to come up with a way to pass it in without it being a method, right? So they put this keyword in there. This is a Microsoft thing. I don't think any Java doesn't do it this way. So you'll have to learn. I think Java, you just make up your own. You just create methods. There is no such. I don't think there is a properties there. They may have done something with it now because these languages always change. They add features to languages and stuff like that. So why don't we test out using it? Okay. That's all you have to do anytime you create a property. Now what we can do here is when we set it, I mean we can put code in here that checks to make sure that the input value, if there were certain restrictions or requirements, we can put a whole bunch of code inside here, and then maybe it restricts what the person inputs, or maybe it changes what the person inputs. It depends on the situation, right? So we have the flexibility to do whatever we want with it in this particular way. So that, and the only way that M gender is going to get a value is if it's suitable or not. Now here we're just straight up assigning it in. It's already strict. Strict in the sense that I can't assign a value that is not, I mean, other than a gender type anyways, right? So we could save this, and then we can go to our form now, our form code, into our button. We're showing what Ivan's pay and whatever here. So now I wanna set the variable this property. So after I create Ivan, I'm going to use his name. Notice that I can access Ivan as many times as I want because it's an object, right? I've had students in the past that every time they wanted to use a method or property, they created a new variable for it. You don't. Once you create it once, it's alive, then you can access the properties and methods as many times as you want until the code block that it's in ends. So Ivan's created, so I can go Ivan dot gender equals, you just do gender type dot female? No, male. You knew I was going to do that. Right? And then do that. I can't set it to anything else because gender is a gender type, so the right hand side has to match. Notice how I can access gender type in because I made it public. So it'll be available to anything in the project now. Even though I put it in that one class, I can use it anywhere now. If you did it private, you could only use that gender type in that class that you put it in. And it might not even work. Yeah, it should work in there, I think. Yeah, you wouldn't want to make it an enumeration private. It doesn't make any sense. So it might even if we don't put public in, it might even just default to that. We could try it, see what happens, but it doesn't make sense. So now, now I'll access this. I'll set it to male, and then instead of showing what the pay is, because we already tested that out, what we can do is test accessing it using the get now, right? So I could say gender equals plus we'll do Ivan dot gender. So what it's going to do now is it's going to output Ivan's gender, right? So it's going to go in here. We give him his rate of pay. We assign Ivan gender, male or female. It does this other stuff with this object. And then over here, instead of outputting the pay, we're just going to output the gender, just so we can see it on the screen. So we have we've used this property in terms of assigning it a value or setting the value. We're using what's called the modifier. Okay, and then over here we're accessing or using the accessor attribute of this property. So those terms are important to know. Modifier and accessor. I always throw some sort of multiple choice or question or something. So when I click this here now, it outputs that he's male. And that value is stored. That value is stored inside the class. It's stored inside this variable mGender. And the only way to get access to mGender is through the property. That's the concept of encapsulation. Right? It encapsulates, it hides that private variable, and the only way to get at it is through some exposed method or property. And in this case, it's a property. Very, very powerful, principle of object-oriented programming. Okay, often regarded as the first and second principle because it's data encapsulation and data abstraction. Does it make sense what I mean by encapsulation? Right? You're hiding value. You don't have direct access to it unless through the structures that you expose. I mean, if I made this, I can make this thing public right here, public gender type mGender, and then it would act like a property because it's like a variable. You could set it, but it's better to put it inside one of these things like a property or a method because you have a lot more control, right? I could put restrictions here, I could check things, I can add other things in the code. A lot of times you don't have to, it's just straight up assigning the value and just getting the value, but it's a nice way of doing it. Protecting your code or your internal variables. We're good? Why don't we, we're going to do a little modification because when we create the actual object with the constructor, that's probably the best place to assign what its gender is, right? Not after. So the constructor should do it, right? And we shouldn't change the gender because why would you actually change the gender of somebody after? They're set once and that's it. You shouldn't change it after. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to modify this and we're going to make it read-only. So to make it read-only, we're only going to use the get. So all we have to do is comment that out. So we're going to say read-only. So now I won't be able to assign a value to it. So if I actually run my code right now, see, it's giving me an error. It just says you can't assign the value. So we got to take that out. Okay, hold on. This will still work. But what we're going to do is inside our constructor, where's my constructor? Up at the top here. So over here, you're going to pass in the pay rate, but you're also going to pass in gender type and then gender. And then what's going to happen is mGender is going to equal that, like that. So now when someone creates this object, the gender gets assigned along with the pay rate, and we'll do a few other things with it too. You'll have to go back into your form and then add this in there. So when we go to our form, we'll put a comma, comma, and then do gender type dot male, and then there you go. So when this thing gets created, Ivan gets his pay rate, it gets its gender set to male, and then I can access the pay, and then I can access, well, it's read only, right? So I can access the get part. So now, see, if this was, Okay, if I made this public over here, I wouldn't be able to restrict it as read-only, would I? There would be no way of doing that. If I made this variable public right here, mgender would be accessible as if it were any variable to assign a value and to get the value. I wouldn't be able to restrict it, so I have to encapsulate it in this case. And it's a perfect example of encapsulation now, because I'm assigning the value when it gets generated. The class gets, or the object gets created, but I can't assign it any other time. That's it, set, done. That's the way I want this to operate because I designed it that way, and it makes sense for this case. If I run it now, it still says he's male because it gets assigned when it gets created. So I needed to show that to you to show the purpose of why I would want to actually put this inside a property or a method. Right? Now I restricted it to getting and it's setting. Usually you don't have write-only property, you usually just have read-only. I gotta write some things on the board for you. Maybe I'm gonna put it here because I gotta keep that up. Alright, let's take a look at this. I may have details left out, but I think it should work. So here's some properties that I want you to add in. I want you to add in the person's first name, person's last name, their employee number, uses an int, it'll be 5 digits. Maybe 4 or 5 digits, that int will be fine for that. Okay, so have it as a number. So make that an integer. We did the gender, and I want that as read-only. Their pay rate, I want that as also read-only. Okay, so make that into a property. I don't think we have that right now. No, we don't have that. So you can change that. Okay. The pay type. two types of pay you usually have for people that work within the company. You'll have either salaried employee, or they will be an hourly. Okay. We need to, if they're salary, they're going to have salary over here, so we better add that in. What's that? Not salary. No. Okay. So if the person is hourly, they will need regular hours. That has to be entered in, and they'll have overtime hours that have to be entered in order for you to do the calculation. Okay. And that will tie into their pay rate. So pay rate, regular hours, and overtime hours will those things will kind of work together. A person at salary does not have a pay rate, will not have regular hours, nor will it have overtime hours, because they just get salary. It doesn't matter. You work overtime, too bad. You don't get paid. You just get paid a lump sum. That's what you get paid. If you're sick a couple of days, you still get paid. Right? So depends. Managers are typically salaried. Maybe somebody that's working inside the shop floor or something might not be, right? More on hours. Okay, so we'll just take it into account like that. Now the methods. This is This is private, right? What I want you to do, you're gonna need. You're gonna have to create some enum for this, because the pay type. You're going to have to, I would create an enum for that, so the pay type is going to be either salary or, what did I write there, or hourly, right? So you need an enum for that. The only method that they'll see will be called getPay. And this getPay, when it goes in, it'll take a look at some of these. So if the person is a pay type of salary, then all you'll do is access what the value is in their salary, and then they're all set. They'll have a value there, right? If the person is an hourly, you'll get access to their hourly, their regular hours and their overtime hours. Now, the regular pay will be a private method, because what I want you to do is I want you to use a method inside another method. Okay. So the regular pay will tie into the regular hours multiplied by the pay rate. The overtime hours the person will enter in overtime hours and they get paid 1.5 times. So inside here you take their regular hours. No, wait. You'll take their overtime hours, and then multiply by 1.5, and then multiply by the pay rate. Right? So it's kind of like doing their regular. So their pay will be the addition of the regular pay plus their overtime pay inside here. If it's salary, you just output what their salary is. And the salary will be listed as, let's say, bi-weekly or whatever. Just assume everything's done every 2 weeks. So you're reading in their regular hours, their overtime hours. That's over a 2-week period. Salary, that'll be over a 2-week period. So you won't put in, let's say someone gets paid $50,000 a year, you won't put in 50,000. You'll put in whatever that's equal to over 2 weeks. Okay, don't worry about taxes or money taken up or whatever. Just say that these people get paid exactly that amount. Now, for the constructor, I mean, a lot of this stuff will just get loaded up, but I just want you to, so in the constructor, make sure you have the pay type in there. We'll do employee, and we'll do the employee number, and the first name, and the last name. All those things could be added in there. And then the other things will be read in after. So this will be read-only. This will be read-only. This is read-only. This is read-only. This is read-only. So you could read it. These things right here will be assigned after. Okay, so these things are properties, but they'll be read-only and read and write ability. So we got a mixture because if we put these ones in the constructor along with what we have in there already. So I think we pay rate. Maybe we'll take that out. So pay type will go in there. Yeah. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. So use the class designer to start doing. Do the properties first. They're easy. Okay. And then do your constructor. Then do the methods. It's probably the easiest way to do it. You should have everything kind of constructed by then, and then you can just access. To access, when you create a regular pay, make sure you write private in front, and then it's going to return back a pay, so it'll be a double, right? To access that method inside getPay, all you have to do is just type in its name. You don't have to create. You're in that class. You don't have to create that class in it. You know what I mean? When you're inside a class and it has any method, you can access any method just by its name. So you just type in regular, what did I call it? Regular pay, bracket, you pass in whatever you need to, and it'll return the value for it. Okay, so inside this get pay, you'll have two calculations. Well, one calculation if it's hourly, and then the other one is just a straight up reading it in. Okay, but these will have to be assigned before you call that. Okay, so technically we should probably put it all in the constructor, but we won't. If you read it in, data in, it'll all be in there. Okay? So, then what we're probably going to do is we're going to create another class called employees, and that class will be an array of these, and then we're going to load them in from a file. And we can load all this in. Let's just see how this goes. I'm just doing this for my head, so I don't, I'm not sure how it's going to work out. I've never done this before with another class, so you're kind of the first with doing it this way. So let's see how this works. Okay, so I think it's a good start here. If you're confused by any of the concepts of the class, the property, you got to come and see me now, so I could try and explain it to you maybe in a different way, and make sure it's clear in your head. Inside the notes, you could skip over the section that says array of objects, and you could kind of come over here. Part F, we'll talk about the accesses and modifiers. That's the coding that we just did for properties. And then you can see the modifier over here if you want to take a look. I have 3 of them listed here. The modifier for any property or any, well, you can see here, you could use it for a class, a method, or a field or property. We should probably put property in here too, because properties are part of it. I might be using the term field as a property, but okay. So property should be added. The modifier just means if it's accessible. So if it's public, that means you can access it from another class. If it's private, you can only access it within that same. You can only access that method, property, or field in that same class. If it's called static, you don't have to use the new keyword to use it. You know how when you had the console, we just typed in the word console dot or the math class, math dot square root? It's because that math class was set as static, and all the methods in there were set as static, so you don't have to use the new keyword to use it. But in our case, the new keyword is important because it allows us to initialize things. Think about it, in the math class, you don't need to initialize anything. I just want to use like the square root method. I just want to use the round method, right? If I use a new keyword, there's nothing I'm going to initialize anything with. So that's why in those cases, and the same thing with the console, they made them as static. We'll never use this, okay? But I put it in there because to try to show you that classes that use the static, you can access without using the new keyword. So you just type in the class name, You don't even have to create a variable of it. Just type in the class name, math, console, put a period after it, and all the static methods will be available to you. And it'll access them and use them straight up. Okay? So it's kind of like a quick way of getting access to those things. So they even thought of that. Right? But all the ones that we do will be all public and private, so we'll always have to use the new keyword. Okay, but you can read through all that and to kind of make it straight in your mind. And then over here it talks about properties in a little bit more detail. Okay, it talks about the get and set, the accessor and mutator. Know those terms. They're important to know. Okay, and then don't worry about polymorphism. We'll do that another time. Okay, and then we're gonna probably go into this array of objects on Monday. Okay, so we need to get this in there first and get it working with everybody, and then we're gonna look at how we can create another class called employees, which is plural, which we can create which will contain more than one employee. So now when we load it up, our program, we could load up from a file and load up, let's say, 100 employees. Which one gets paid the most? Go through it. Like, we could do all kinds of things with it, right?